I want to talk to you guys a little bit about our coaching program and mental health in general and like what's going on with the world and what's going on with us. Why are we sad? Why are we stuck? Why are we depressed? Why are we lonely? All this stuff. We're just going to talk about it for a few minutes and just think a little bit about what Healthy Gamer does as an organization. So the first thing to consider is that mental health is getting worse all over the world. It's now surpassed cardiovascular disease and cancer in terms of causing the most morbidity and mortality, which means that the cost of mental health in terms of like lost work days and impairing like people's education and stuff like that, as well as mortality, is now worse than cancer and cardiovascular disease. So like what's going on there? Right? Why is mental health getting worse? Like, isn't the world getting better? Like, aren't we like advancing as society? And sure, in some ways. But why is that? So mental health is getting worse right now. And what our society does to deal with that is essentially like psychiatric treatment, right? So if you have a mental illness, then you should go see a psychiatrist or therapist, and then they'll help you with that. And that's certainly true. And I'm a psychiatrist, so I'm a big believer in psychiatric treatment. But I think part of the problem is that somewhere along the way, mental stress became like illness. And what I mean by that is that if we think about like depression, right? So an illness is something that when your like body or brain does something that it's not supposed to, that's ill. So it's like a malfunction of your mind or your brain. And sometimes something like depression can be caused by a malfunction. Sometimes what happens is when people feel like lost or they feel depressed or they feel stuck, it's not like a malfunction. It's not like their life is actually going wonderful and something in their brain tells them that they're awful human beings. That's what real clinical illness looks like. It's like, if you think about someone like schizophrenia, for example, there isn't a whole lot of evidence that the devil is possessing the people around them, but that's what they believe. It's like their mind is not congruent with reality. The challenge that we face nowadays is that a lot of our depression is actually congruent with reality, especially if you look at like Gen Z and millennials. Like the world that we live in and the reality that we face is actually depressing. If you're 23 years old and like struggling to find a job and feel alone and like don't know what to do with yourself and don't know like where to go, how to put your life together, how to find motivation, that's not an illness. Like there isn't some part of your brain that's like malfunctioning. That's life. And so this is the problem, right? Is because then like you have a generation of people like us who get told, oh, like you're mentally ill, so go see a psychiatrist or therapist. And then you go see a psychiatrist and therapist, and they diagnose you with depression. They start you on a pill and they send you home, and then you like play video games all day. Browse Reddit, watch YouTube, whatever. Like it doesn't, and the pill doesn't fix your life because that's not what it does. And so the first issue is that like, sure, mental health is getting worse in this country, and like psychiatrists and therapists are not cutting it. That's been my experience as a psychiatrist. So let's just think about, so the average age of a psychiatrist is older than 50 years old, right? So if you go to them and you say, yeah, like, you're talking to them about like Twitch, like they're not going to understand what you're talking about. The second thing is that sometimes it can take months, like 2 months, 3 months, 4 months to see a psychiatrist or therapist. It can be quite expensive. So therapists will cost anywhere from like $100 to $400 per session. Psychiatrists will charge anywhere between like $200 for a 30-minute appointment up to like $400 or $500, at least in the United States. They don't understand gaming. They don't understand social media. They don't understand like FOMO and things like that, right? They're going to diagnose you with Oedipal complexes and depression. Psychiatry is too old, too slow, and too ineffective. It just doesn't work well. It's just not, doesn't work great. And so this is why we started our coaching program. Because a lot of what you guys struggle with is not illness, but is like actually congruent with reality. That you don't know what you're doing with your life. You don't know what your purpose is. You don't know how to get control of your life. You play too many video games. You struggle with depression. You struggle with anxiety, etc. Right? That's why we started the coaching program, to help you with all of those things. Because the story that I heard time and time and time again. So when I appeared on the internet and a while Dr. K appeared, I would tell people, hey man, like, you should go see a therapist, bro. Like, they can help you with the depression, man. And then the story that I got back was I did go see a therapist, and I spent like 2 weeks talking to them, and they had no clue what was going on like with me. Like, they didn't understand anything. They were like, just stop playing, just like play video games less, bro. That's what they got, right? So a lot of psychiatric treatment just hasn't been effective. This is actually known in the psychiatric literature. So I'm going to show you guys something, okay? So the Journal of the American Medical Association, Antidepressant Drug Effects and Depression Severity, a patient-level meta-analysis. Here's the main thing that I want to show you guys, okay? So this is a good paper published in a reputable journal. Okay, so this is a scale, this is a depression scale, the Hamilton D depression scale. Cohen D effect sizes for the difference between medication and placebo were estimated to be less than 20%. What this means is that antidepressant medication has a less than 20% improvement compared to placebo. So like the effect size of antidepressant medication is less than 20%. In this meta-analysis done in the Journal of the American Medical Association. Okay? Estimates of the magnitude of superiority of medication over placebo increased with increases in baseline depression severity. So what that means is that the more depressed you are, the more medication helps. But on average, it's a less than 20% improvement. And let's think about why this would be. And I think the reason for this is because when people go to a psychiatrist when they're depressed, not all of them are mentally ill. So the pill works if you have a neurochemistry imbalance, but a lot of people just have like a congruent depression. It's like a depression that fits with what's going on with your life right now. You should be depressed. You're not mentally ill. Your life is just going nowhere, so that's why you're bummed, man. So let's look at another paper. Okay, so this is the New England Journal of Medicine, the most reputable medical journal in the world. So what this paper is talking about is the idea that antidepressants are like not as effective as we think they are. So what this means is that if you look at, according to the published literature, so studies on antidepressants, it appeared that 94% of trials were positive. So if you look at all of the studies on antidepressant medication, 94% of them are positive. But if you look at FDA analysis, so this is all of the data that was submitted to the FDA, that not necessarily published. So like if a drug company does a trial, they have to submit their data to the FDA, but they don't have to publish it. FDA analysis, only 51% of trials were positive. And so if you look at the effect size of antidepressant medication was anywhere between 11 to 69% for drugs, and 32% overall. So one study tells us that antidepressant medication is less than 20% improvement. This study shows us that, generally speaking, antidepressant is 32% improvement. So it's like 20 to 30%. And why is that? It's because lots of depressed or sad people are going to see psychiatrists and they're being given pills. And the pill doesn't fix it because not everyone has a neurochemistry imbalance. So psychiatry is like, we're struggling, we're failing. You guys are going to psychiatric offices and then they're giving everyone medications. Or not everyone, but a lot of psychiatrists are primarily what we call psychopharmacologists. So they see patients for 15 to 20 minutes per visit. They'll see 3 to 4 patients per hour, and they primarily prescribe medication. And the improvement that they're giving people is 20 to 32%. So something is not working, right? The system is not working. The best that we have to offer, and this is me too, like I'm fucking faculty at Harvard Medical School, and like when I prescribe an antidepressant medication, it's not like my numbers are better. My numbers are still 20 to 30%. That's just how it is. So like, what's wrong? So this is cool. So somewhere along the way, what someone realized is that like, okay, if someone has a problem, you can take a well-trained psychiatrist who has never lived a day in the life of that person and try to give them like expert knowledge. But if you really want to help people, it turns out that people who have actual experience are actually effective at helping people. So this is where peer-delivered recovery support services come in. So on one end of the spectrum, we have psychiatrists. So these are like highly trained individuals that have never really experienced addiction. And on the other hand of the spectrum, we have AA sponsors, like Alcoholics Anonymous sponsors, who have lived with addiction their entire life but have no formal training. And so what happened is someone had this like brilliant idea, like what if we take AA sponsors and we start training them? We give them something like a training of what a psychiatrist has. And a peer support specialist was born. And it turns out that this is an effective and cost-effective and treatment size effective intervention. That if you take someone who's lived with something like video game addiction or alcohol addiction, and you put them through training and you equip them to help another human being, a combination of their personal experience plus formal training is actually very effective. So there are a lot of methodological limitations. So this study is from 2015, so there's more data on this now. The body of evidence suggests salutary effects on participants. There are better papers that sort of suggest that peer support interventions work. So this is where our coaching program was born. So it was born from a couple of ideas. The first is that what holds us back in life and why we feel depressed or anxious isn't necessarily a medical illness and doesn't necessarily need a medical intervention, right? So what our coaches target is like, how do you find motivation? How do you stop procrastinating? How do you overcome like feelings of like guilt or shame, right? How do you stop playing video games? How do you understand yourself better so that you can play the game of life better? That's what our coaching program is for. That's why it was built. It's because mental health is too old, too slow, too expensive, and also mistargeted. So our coaching program was developed specifically because what I realized is like, what we need is like an army of peer support specialists. We need an army of people who understand what you've been through, and then they need to learn like a distillation of the best of what like psychotherapy techniques and motivational interviewing and a couple of these other evidence-based interventions. And if we can put those two things together, can they help? So now what I'd like to do is answer that question for you guys. So here is data from our coaching program. Here is the change in purpose and meaning after 4 weeks of group coaching. So this is group coaching, personal coaching, free coaching, okay? So after 4 weeks, people have a 12% increase in a sense of purpose and meaning after 1 month of group coaching, 14% increase after 8 weeks, and 20% increase in purpose and meaning after 12 weeks of group coaching. Their sense of control over their life increases by about 9%. The negative effects of video games go down by about 11%. The positive effects of video games go down by about 1%. They have a 15% reduction in anxiety and a 17% reduction in depression after 12 weeks of group coaching. So like, remember, what's the effect size of antidepressant medication on depression? Do you guys remember? So personal coaching. So this is interesting, right? So if we look at 8 weeks of group coaching and 8 weeks of personal coaching, we see that personal coaching has a 20% improvement in meaning after 8 weeks. So these people get more of a 6% versus 7% agency or control. Negative effects of video games, 10% versus 14%. And this is pretty cool. Like they actually enjoy video games more at the 8-week mark. The positive effects of video games are actually improved, which is something that really no one else looks at besides us. Because the rest of the world just thinks about video game addiction and, video games bad. What I've come to realize is that video games have there are good things and bad things about video games. 17% reduction in anxiety, 17% reduction in depression. Now, if you compare the 12-week mark, right? So group coaching catches up, and then theoretically, even like personal coaching drops down a little bit at the 12-week mark. We're not really sure why that is. I think some of this may be sampling bias, which I can get into details. But generally speaking, group coaching catches up to personal coaching at 12 weeks. And the other thing is, I don't know if you guys know this, but about a third of our coaching hours are free coaching. So we also looked at free coaching. So this is pretty interesting, right? So if you look at free coaching is personal, by the way. So our free coaching cohort actually improves more than our paid coaching cohort. So like the question that we wondered is like, is our free coaching lower quality than our personal coaching? And it turns out that the answer is no. In theory, it's maybe even superior. I think there's some issues with this data, but generally speaking, it means that if you're a free coaching client, you're not getting the shaft. Okay. So don't worry about it. The point here though, is that if you look at these effect sizes, all these like numbers, 19% versus 18%, 19% here, 14% here, whatever. The ballpark is that like, it's about 20%, right? Like there's about a 20% reduction, 15%, 18% reduction, 18% reduction, 20% reduction. Like it's somewhere around 20%. So our coaching program works. So people were wondering, okay, how do we measure this? So here's an example of like the kinds of data we collect. So when we're trying to assess for purpose or meaning, we ask people, does your life lack direction? My life lacks direction. My life has purpose. I'm excited to get out of bed in the morning. I have forward momentum in life. I feel stuck in life. So like these are the things that get 20% better after 8 weeks. And when you guys are thinking about like 20%, so I know that, we make it sound like 20% isn't very big, but let me tell you as a clinician, a 20% improvement in depression is huge, right? So just think about this. Like what if you weighed 20% less or 20% more than you do? What if you were 20% taller or 20% shorter? 20% is a big difference. And especially when it comes to something like depression, because all it takes is like you to start moving in the right direction for you to start taking care of yourself better. So there's like a 20% improvement in meaning from week to week, even if it's a 20% increase. If you have more meaning in your life when you wake up, if you're 20% more excited to get out of bed every morning, that's going to be an effect that will build up over the course of a year. And your life will start to change. So 20% I'm happy with. These are the kinds of things. So like this is like closer to a 10% improvement, right? I'm too undisciplined to make meaningful change. Unfortunately, we only help that by about 10%. We're working on that, by the way. We're working on improving our intervention to help with this, right? So this is the kind of data that we collect. So this is why we do coaching. And this is why we did this. Like we started this whole thing because y'all need help. And as a society, my profession and myself included are failing you guys. Psychiatry is failing y'all. And that's why we started this. This coaching program was built on your support. And so I felt like it was important to share with you guys why we're doing what we're doing, and what the data looks like. And I hope you guys, it's kind of funny, right? Because, we showed you the data. Like, I didn't sugarcoat anything. Like, that's the actual data. And so there are weird things in the data, like personal coaching, like, purpose drops by 1% from week 8 to week 12. So, like, we don't know what's going on there. I don't really know. But that's the actual data. And I think our program is successful, and people are grateful for having worked with a coach. Like, their life is starting to transform because of the work that they do with their coach. And our coaches are highly dedicated people, really smart, because that's the thing, like we pull from our population, right? So like gamers are smart. You give them like someone to help and you say like, hey, if you show up 1 hour a week and you give everything, all of your attention, all of your compassion, and all of your intelligence to one person, you can make a difference in their life. And our coaches wake up every day and they knock it out of the park. And what they do is these are noobs from the internet with a few months of training, have effect sizes that are arguably comparable to the breakthrough drugs of like big pharma, right? And it's like noobs from the internet. And it's because they care, and it's because they try, and it's because the kind of help that we deliver is actually designed, it's coaching, it's not medical treatment. It's not designed to treat depression. It's designed to like help you move forward in life. Because sometimes you guys may be depressed, but that doesn't mean you're mentally ill. It just means that your life is like not that great right now. So make it worth living. And that's what our coaches are there to help you do. They're there to help you understand how you work. And so once you understand how you work, you can play the game of life in the way that you want. It's about applying self-understanding to building the life that you want to. And that's what we're doing. And so thank you guys very much.